the Western North London podcast, where we sit down each and every week to answer your big Arsenal questions. I'm Caleb.
And I'm Tim.
Tim, we're back. It's actually the first day of the preseason today.
Yeah,
we're already back in action, really.
It's so crazy. Soccer never stops, and Arsenal apparently never stops either.
These guys don't have time to sleep.
No, I mean, you almost feel bad for some of the players that are just going from game to game to game. Like some of the players that have been involved in the Euros are going straight back into training, you know?
Yeah, hopefully they get a decent break before really getting into the depths of the season. I think Saka will probably be out for a little bit before catching up with the rest of the team.
Yeah, and I know we're going to go into that a little bit, but yeah, I'm hoping the players have gotten the rest that they needed and then have come back refreshed and refocused.
Yeah, let's hope so. That's the goal is to, get a little bit of a reset. It seems like that is almost something of days gone by.
Are you refreshed and refocused? Are you able to kind of shake off last season and get ready for the new one, or are you still kind of in last season mode?
It's hard. It doesn't really feel like there's been much of a break, and especially considering that the team looks pretty much the same. I watched the first game today, and it's very, very similar. It's pretty much all the same faces. So we'll talk more about that later in the episode here. But it does feel a bit like deja vu, especially with results.
Well, speaking of refreshing, what's your beer of the week there, Caleb?
Well, I've got. I went back to the Bale Breaker, homegrown West Coast IPA.
Oh, nice.
I think that this is maybe the third can I've had of this, and it gets better. I didn't dislike it, but I feel like I've liked it more and more every time.
You're getting more of a taste for it?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's very smooth.
Nice. So it's like a good, sessionable. You can kind of drink it, a bunch of them on a day, or is it like a kind of...
It's at 7.2, so I don't know if I'd have more than a couple.
Yeah, it's not necessarily sessionable.
Yeah, not exactly.
Depending on your definition of sessionable.
Right. Forgive me while I adjust my mic here. I feel like I'm too far away. Okay, there we go. Yeah. What do you have in your hands this week?
I haven't opened it. It's a Matchless, which is a Seattle brewery. It's a Old Pine IPA. I haven't opened it yet. It's supposed to be a West Coast. It has tasting notes on the back, which always makes it. Yeah.
Very nice.
And I said Seattle, but it is Tumwater. I apologize for the the slight geographical mistake, but it's supposed to be piney, citrusy, and vintage. I'm not exactly sure what vintage means as a tasting note.
It reminds you of days of yore.
Well, I'm hoping it's an old school IPA. That's kind of where I'm hoping it's going. I mean, it's got Amarillo, Simcoe, Centennial. What is the percentage? Oh, it's not showing me the percentage. Weird. Oh, 6.5. So it's a little bit less than your entry. Oh yeah. I really like that. Oh, that's nice. I like that. It's definitely my type of IPA that is more the old school. Now I know why they're saying vintage. It tastes like an old Northwest IPA, not one of these big, bold, super hoppy, piney, tarry ones.
So what we would call a pale these days.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has a little bit more of a punch than a pale, but no, this is exactly my type of IPA. I highly recommend that.
I feel like everything shifted up. Like everything got more hoppy. So pales are like old IPAs.
And Pilsners are the new pales.
Yes, exactly. That is pretty much how I think of it, because Pilsners are very drinkable, but kind of like on the weaker end by comparison.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know there's a bunch of hopped Pilsners now, which like they generally don't have a ton of hops. They'll have some hops, but there's I forget who does it, but a beer called Pivo, which is a hopped Pilsner. But
Pivo.
pivo, I believe
Pivo.
that's
I like it.
it's a Slavic for beer, so like Polish and Czech and a couple other beer Slavic countries
Nice.
use that word for beer. Yeah, but yeah, definitely Old Pine. It gets a thumbs up in my book.
Cool. I like a piney kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I like drinking trees.
Yeah, and this one doesn't have a strong piney, but it has that. It's just so much. It's just refreshing. It's a nice, refreshing IPA.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next bit of business. No, well, yeah, no pun intended. A bit of business in Tim's bit. What do you got for me this week?
Well, seeing as penalties are going to be a big chunk of our conversation today, and as in the public consciousness, I just wanted to know what you would do to replace the penalty, because I think we all agree it's kind of a crappy way to end a game. You know, it's more of a coin flip than anything else, and there's so much that's not soccer that goes on in a penalty. So I was just wondering what you thought would be a fun way to end the game, if not for penalties.
Let's be clear here. We're not talking about all penalties. We're talking about spot kicks, right?
Yes.
At the end of the game.
Yes, if you want to be condemned.
Okay, so if we wanted to get rid of that, so other options being like a golden goal sort of situation.
I don't know.
This could
Playing
be
checkers.
totally new.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be any of the older. And it just doesn't have to be realistic. It could just be fun.
All right. Well, I think you pick your best. You cut your team down. I think it'd do like a 5-on-5 or a 3-on-3, and you just keep cutting it down.
All that's left is the goalies going at it with each other, like trying to take one goal kicks.
Yeah, goal. I think goalies are standard. You have to have goalies. I think you're not playing with open goals.
Yeah,
but it could go down to like a 2-on-2 at the bare minimum.
Or what if? But I mean, then you could be a little tricky if you're playing and you like take out your goalie and have extra players in the field. You know, kind of like hockey does.
Oh yeah, just
so
go with guys with. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so it could be like a little bit
strategy.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be equally as dumb as what exists.
Yeah, I mean, like the funny thing is, and I know we're going to go into that game, but like I didn't have anyone in that horse race. England and Italy for me as national teams are kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. Other than I want Saka to do well.
Yeah,
and that was my only. But I still got nervous on that penalty kick, like just that shoot. I just like uncontrollably like anxious and it was just kind of a weird sensation for me.
Yeah, I was way more invested in that than I expected to be. I guess I was definitely coming at it from a neutral standpoint, but without Saka's involvement, I might not have cared. But I felt like I was invested in his well-being and that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into that, so I won't.
maybe we just go right there, unless you want to talk more about penalty replacements.
No, I think I like your idea. I think I'd go with that. But yeah, I mean, my thoughts with the whole thing was just as soon as Saka came on the field, my thought was like, oh God, it's going to penalties. I hope he makes his penalty. That was just my only thought.
You went right there. It's kind of I guess the way the game played out. It felt inevitable that it was going to go down to the wire. And it definitely was a pretty equal match to be frank. To be honest.
It was. I mean, it was an interesting game. I think England really came out in the first 10 minutes and dominated. And I was really surprised, especially the way they were attacking on the left there. Mm-hmm. And they just really owned Italy's left side of the pitch. I thought it was when they scored that goal so early, and then we're still looking good and looking almost to get another one in the first 10 minutes. I was worried for Italy, but then the game settled down. And then as the game progressed, England just kind of shrunk more and more into a shell. And I think about the 30th, 35th minute, I was watching it with a friend. I just turned to him like, England's not going to win this game 1-0. Like they're just shelling up like they're expecting to win 1-0, and it's just not going to happen. And at that point, I think Italy had like 70% of the possession and were just dominating the midfield, and England was kind of playing this bunkerish game. So
Yeah, like you said, that first chunk of that game. I mean, when Shaw scored, he was literally standing by himself on that side of the field. It had time to wave across,
I know.
and they had time to pick out the pass to him. I mean, it was just crazy, like how much space he was given. And this is Italy, who's defensively about as stout as you can get in this tournament.
I think had in my mind over the whole tournament, it had the best defense in the entire tournament, except for that
Right.
like 10 minutes there, which was madness.
I watched a lot of the England games. I think the only one I didn't watch was the one where they really did the best against Ukraine. I didn't see that one. But the games I did watch, it occurred to me that the game plan was always to try to play very conservative football. I don't really understand what the mindset was as far as it was that if there was a feeling that they were maybe vulnerable somewhere and they were trying to correct for it. But I wouldn't say their defense was bad. I couldn't really understand why they put so much emphasis on it and why there was this desire to try to play on the counter or something like that. I mean, I know that is something that is in that is Kane's wheelhouse, really. Like getting him out in space should be what you're trying to do. But they never seemed to get out of the midfield. Like they just could not control the ball long enough to really do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in England was at its best when Kane was actually playing kind of in a deeper role and kind of distributing from that role.
But then like when you're trying to counter, like who's he? Like, Sterling isn't running in front of him. It just wasn't working.
Yeah, and I don't think it plays to. I mean, I'm far be it for me to give any type of positive talk about Kane because I dislike that player very much. But I don't think you play to his strengths when that's what he's doing is being a provider. That his job is to be up front, breaking on counters and scoring goals. And for whatever reason, whether he was just off that tournament or the way the England was structured, it just wasn't happening for them. And I think you also have to think that it's weird that they weren't playing the Sanchos earlier. They weren't playing their more creative players, even the Sakas. They really were just kind of playing that conservative plan.
Yeah, I think once they got past that dominant period to start the game, it was, I think you could have, the way they started playing, you could have made the case of, I can understand why they might not have started Saka. But then after that, when they kind of started having a difficult time keeping possession and doing anything in Italy's half, it was like, man, this game is screaming for Saka. Like they need people who can make stuff happen in the opponent's end of the field. I think Grealish would have been a better sub earlier on as well. Just to try to make things happen. But it was just like, as soon as they scored, it was lock up shop. We're going to ride this out for, 88 minutes because they scored so early. Yeah. I hate those kind of tactics. I feel like if you have the firepower that they have on paper, you have to try to take the game to Italy and take advantage of that early lead, because you had 88 minutes to go get a second goal and really put that game away. And it's just super frustrating, even from a neutral standpoint, to watch that kind of game go down in the final.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you're not going to hold Italy to a goal or a 1-0 lead. It's not going to happen. Italy is always going to score.
But you got to think that they thought maybe Italy wouldn't. I mean, you're looking at what they have on paper is not like a ton of firepower as far as their strikers go. They've got, I mean, not to knock on any of their strikers, but they don't have like a guy that's going to go out and take the game over.
I think that's maybe a little bit of an oversimplification. I think there were a lot of really good players on obviously a lot of really good players on that Italy team. And I think a lot of them are just underrated in the English media and the English speaking media. I think you look at the GA's, you look at all these players that are really good players, and I think that might have been part of the miscalculation, is just thinking that it's not a vintage Italy team when it really is just it is a good team, just not necessarily as remarked, because a lot of those players don't play in the Premier League and don't play, necessarily for the sexy teams.
Yeah, they play in the Italian bubble, so the Italian people know what they have. And I don't want to knock any of these players. They clearly, as a team, were very good through the whole tournament. I don't think anybody would knock their performance anywhere along the way. But I think when you're trying to strategize, you might think, oh, they've lost, Spinazzola, like losing some players along the way.
Yeah.
They probably thought, okay, we don't have to maybe worry as much as we would have earlier in the tournament. Like maybe there's some idea that there was some weakness there that they could just really England could play a defensive game and get out of that and be fine. But score too early. That is always that is the problem. You scored way too early. You can't hold the game for that long.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between scoring too early also and then trying to hold that so long. And I know we're talking, that's exactly what we've been saying, is it that, there's different ways of holding a lead, and you don't have to just like bunker up and give up all the possession. I mean, even at the end of the game, Italy had something around like 63% of the possession, 66. England only put on 2 shots on target. You're not like, it's just like, if that's your, what you're going with, I just find it hard to believe you think you're going to win that game.
They had 6 shots, period.
Yeah.
19 on Italy. I mean, Italy was clearly going for it. And you can't really look at what England was trying to do and say that they were going after it. I mean, really a lot of the creative talent did not come in until later in the second half.
Yeah, and then you substitute in Rashford and Sancho, 2 of your players that could make a difference. Put them in like at the very, 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 very end of extra time. At least give them like 10, 15 minutes to try and make a difference in the game.
He put them in like they were like some sort of penalty kick specialists,
Yeah.
And we've seen that happen in these international tournaments where people will come in and they are very good at that. And we see this in the World Cup specifically. You see when it goes to penalties, they will tweak the lineups and bring in guys that they know are better. Clearly after that was a poor strategy altogether, because you brought in guys that were pretty much cold. Like they had maybe 5 minutes in the end of the game to try to get their head in this, and it was poor tactics all around.
And not even cold, and not just cold, but also young. It's such a pressure. Like I have had a penalty kick in a shootout for a very small trophy when I've played. Mm-hmm. And I always use this example when I play, just how like it's just so much pressure. My thought was, I'm going to keep it low and on target. Low and on target was what I kept on saying to myself. And of course, when I took it, I skied it completely over the goal. And
that adrenaline spikes right when you connect.
Exactly. And it is true. It's just like, and that was like as little pressure as one could get. It was a friendly competition. There was a trophy, but it was a very small trophy, you know? And I can't imagine being that age, not necessarily penalty kick specialist, and having all that pressure with no time to get your head in the game,
Yeah. I don't know if those players, I can't say whether they would have come in and made a difference, because it seemed like the England team was just having struggles maintaining possession. So if you can't maintain possession, you cannot set up these players to really do anything. Mm-hmm. I think it was always you need good, strong leaders on the field. So who do you take out to put in these young players when everything's on the line?
Yeah.
So it was like they were of two minds all the way through. And it is a team that seems like, even though they are clearly doing as good as they've ever done, but they are a team in transition. Like there are a lot of young players in this group that don't have this sort of top level competition experience. And so who do you lean on? Who can you possibly take off? I mean, you do take off Kane or um, um, any of your top so-called top players,
Yeah.
To make room for these young players to try to go get you a win, or do you wait until the last minute and then just sneak them on there and hope that they can do something for you as penalty kick takers? It's a very difficult situation, and I don't know if I would have gotten it right, but I don't know that I agree with what they ended up doing.
Well, I mean, I think Southgate overthought himself. I was sat next to two Tottenham supporters at the game, and we were very polite to each other.
Set your things aside. It's the off season.
Exactly. But we were talking about the lineup and just how they were set up for those penalties. Where why do you start off with Kane? Mm-hmm. Like, why not put him fourth or fifth? Because that's when the meaty end of the penalty kicks are. That's where the most pressure starts. The first kick is the one where you probably want. I mean, I can even see Maguire taking the first kick, but you don't want like your best kicker taking it first, in my opinion. That's where you do put a Saka or something like that.
Yeah.
And then to put Saka in, your final three kickers are your youngest players. And then, like, Saka, who's never taken a competitive full level penalty in his life. Like, why you put him fifth is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, you've got Rashford, who's 23, Sancho, who's 21, and Saka, who's 19. I mean, it's just it's insane.
Yeah, it's like you talk about, those are the three penalties that are the highest, pressure.
Yeah,
because like if you miss the first one, you can always feel like, oh, you can get it back and everything like that. But you have if it gets to the fifth penalty, it means you have to score that fifth penalty.
Uh-huh.
And
I was on my feet when Pickford made the save to keep him in it, and then I must have turned white as a ghost as soon as I saw Saka step up. I'm like, no, not my boy, not my little boy.
It was my nightmare situation, because I mean, good on him if he scores it, but I don't. Like, we see him day in, day out. He's not our penalty taker. He's not like, right. I wouldn't put him on Arsenal's top 5 penalty takers.
No. And he kind of, after the game, there was video going around showing Southgate kind of scrambling to figure out who was going to take the penalties and getting his list together. And at some point, you see there was video of him going over to Saka and making that decision. And I could just, I don't know how he felt, but yeah. I know that he is the type of player that is never going to say no.
Yeah.
He is going to take whatever you give him, and not shy away from that responsibility. So in no way do I blame Saka for just saying yes. It's like when you're working for a promotion, you never say no to work. You always say yes. Exactly.
And I mean, that's the thing. And again, even the Tottenham players who are next to me didn't blame Saka for that miss. It's and at least Saka got on frame too. Like, that's all you can ask for, really.
Yeah.
But I feel bad because it's the type of thing that can really ruin careers. I think Southgate has to realize how much responsibility he has with these younger players.
He of all people should absolutely understand how missing a penalty can wreck your career or follow you forever, especially on a high profile one such as that.
Yeah. And, like, as a manager, he should be putting his players in positions of success. And I think putting Saka fifth is not putting him in a position of success in any way,
I can understand to some degree the speed at which things are happening, and you're just trying to put together this list at the last minute, and you're thinking he's reliable, he can do this, and never even having time to think of like, oh my gosh, he's never done this before. He's only 19. Like, there's a lot of things that probably did not come into his mind in that split second where he's trying to decide things.
Well, I don't know though, because I think if he was at all competent as a manager, and I do believe he is competent as a manager. This is not going to be an attack on Southgate, but he should have thought of this well before the penalties were actually being taken.
Sure.
He probably should have thought of that before the game during the lead up. He's like, all right, when it comes to penalty, here's my ranking of players and things.
Yeah.
And I know that there's, substitutions, but it was a pretty managed substitution game. So it wasn't anything crazy.
Yeah, clearly he had a plan when he brought in Sancho and Rashford, but I don't see it. I don't quite understand what the mentality is with that, especially when you have more senior guys. Like I think Grealish could have been ahead of those players. Like you said, Kane could have been pushed back. I don't care how like people were saying Sterling's penalty record isn't perfect, but it's like he's still a senior player who's not going to buckle under pressure. Like he plays for a top team. He's not going to step. He's not going to shy away.
And it's better than Saka's, I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, you take your chances with any of these players that they might miss, but you want to lean on the odds. And when you don't have any record to lean on,
Yeah.
the odds are against them. So it's. I think in retrospect, he's probably kicking himself, and he said as much that it was on him. And I think most people who are of the right mind understand that this was a Southgate issue. But for Rashford, for Sancho, for Saka, when the game ended the way it did, I think anybody who follows the sport knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is really sad and scary, and it is a horrible place for the sport to be in, to know that horrible, racist, just awful vitriol would be coming these players' way immediately.
Exactly.
It's like first on your mind, like what's coming.
Exactly. I mean, I knew, and I mean that is definitely was part of my back of my mind when Saka came on. Is like, oh god, if he misses that penalty, it's gonna be awful, and it's something that needs to be definitely stamped out, and there definitely is more you can do, and it also comes back to all these people complaining about the kneeling before the game. This is exactly why the players are kneeling before their game, because obviously everything else that's going on isn't working. That these, and some people say it's just a vocal minority. It is a vocal minority, but it is a very loud vocal minority that should be dealt with in ways. There are things you can do with social media. There are ways to prevent this. I read one article was just saying, an intern with a cell phone could have stopped this from actually happening to the players. We all knew what was going to happen. You just have a couple people monitoring their profiles and just edit it.
Just turn off comments immediately.
Yeah. We all know exactly what's going to happen. And if you can't change these stupid people's mind, what you can do is deplatform them. We've learned that in the US as well. Like you can deplatform these people and stop a lot of the abuse from at least being public.
Yeah. And I think it was clearly an issue before this, and this only puts shines more of a light on the issue. But like you were saying, there are people who don't really make that connection between the kneeling and the racism that goes on online, because I think like the people who see the kneeling are not necessarily making that connection, or not like necessarily Instagram people, or following what's going on online where the majority of this abuse is coming from. Those people aren't seeing that. They're seeing what's on the field and seeing, oh, they're kneeling, but why? They cannot see what is happening behind the scenes to them.
Yeah, and these players need a way to get that message out, because obviously just talking about it isn't working. I mean, it's been something we've been talking about for years and years. I mean, the Kick It Out campaign's been going on since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And just sitting there and saying in an interview it's not that about the abuse obviously isn't working. So with the kneeling, they're actually getting some traction as far as people covering it and being able to say like, no, this is wrong.
Yeah, and I don't know. I am not racist person, and so I can't really get into the mindset of those people. But I, if I'm English, I identify those players as one of my own. Those are my players. Those are people that represent me and my country. I cannot make the distinction based on the color of their skin to say this person is bad because of this. Like I cannot fathom that.
Well, I mean, I think there's a little bit of they're just mad at the player, so they're trying to find the best way to hurt them. But it's just
Sure.
we all know it. We're all in agreement. It's just small-minded stupidity. There's a lot of historical background that we could go back into
Sure.
to root it out. But I mean, this is probably not the best platform for it. But I think we do need to look at manageable, reasonable ways to stop this, at the very least, from actually happening online. And I think social media companies saying that it's not their responsibility is a cheap way out. I think social media companies do need to start taking responsibility for what's on their platforms,
Yeah. I think the thing that I was heartened by was the immediate understanding from the smarter people, the smarter viewers, that these players need extra support, that we need to go out of our way to counteract the really bad things that are being said about these players. So to me, it was like, well, I want to just put Saka in bubble wrap and lock him away for a few weeks and
put
let
him in
him
a pool with a unicorn and
yeah, just put him back in a time machine and send him back to those joyous days where he had nothing to worry about. But how do you stop it? How do you protect these players? Like both from the racism side of things and just the mental wear and tear that comes from that sort of ending, especially for Saka missing the final kick. I mean, I think that has an extra punch to it.
Yeah, I think one of the things is it is important for people who have a platform just like us or anywhere in public discourse just to acknowledge it and talk about how disgusting and horrible it is and not just kind of sweep it under the rug. And I think that's one way to make it in the open. It's one of those things where it's like, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and just pulling the sunlight out and saying that this is wrong is definitely an important step.
Yeah. Arsenal as a team has come out strongly against this sort of thing, as it's been aimed at players from all sorts of different teams. But our team is no stranger to it, and they have put together a internal task force to deal with these sort of things. So that in and of itself is a positive thing that Arsenal has done, and they were quick to send out messages of support for Saka and messages saying, the abuse is not welcome and not necessary, and as firm as you can be on that sort of thing without actually doing anything about it. They have been doing that, but what can a team, what can the FA, what can UEFA, what can FIFA, like what can any of these bodies do to fix this? Because if you try to punish like fan bases, you are casting a very large net, and so you're going to hurt people who are not necessarily of the same mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really sticky question because it is a question that's bigger than soccer. I think it gets magnified in soccer, as soccer tends to do with these things. But it is a societal issue. It's definitely not just England that is having these issues. We can look very close to home to our own shores, and these types of issues exist here in the United States as well. So, I'm I'm definitely not an expert nor extremely qualified to have all the solutions or the answers. But as I said, just having these discussions, I think, is an important step.
Yeah, and it is wide ranging. It is not just racist. It is homophobic. It is all kinds of horrible things that are said towards players and fans, and it is not necessary in this day and age. And I think it won't be an easy task to stomp it out, but it is something that it can't give up on because it continues to grow in the wrong direction. So I think there has to be an overcorrection almost to make it get things on the right track again. And I don't know what that is, but I think it is just more and more people talking about the negative side of that and trying to continue to talk about it and not let it die down. I think it shouldn't be necessary for players to kneel to bring people's attention to this. I think our attention should never waver from this until it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm hopeful that when Saka comes back to the stadium and there's going to be fans there, hopefully that he gets the love that he deserves, no matter what.
What do you think of I mean, he's so young and still relatively new to our team. Do you feel like he is the type of player who will bounce back and grow from this, or do you see this being a difficult period for him? We've seen players like Ozil who, his struggles with the national team kind of bled into his Arsenal career. So do you feel like this is something he's going to carry with him into this season?
This is where the club becomes so important. This is where, if the club supports him, because one of the issues with Ozil was actually that Arsenal didn't give him a lot of support once he had those issues with the national team.
Yeah.
But I'm very hopeful that with this issue, at the very least, the club is going to be very supportive. And I think the fans, it's up to a lot of us, because it can be career ending and career damaging. I think he's a very strong person. To get to the position he is in life, you have to be a strong person. You have to be strong mentally. And unfortunately, the way the world works, this isn't the first time he's been racially abused. I guarantee you it,
Right.
And so I think he's a strong person, but having the strong support of us as fans and the strong support of the club will go just miles for helping him get better. And we have to remember when we're doing our analysis, because we are part of this, and us as fans, to maybe remember that there's a human behind there, and not to necessarily go hog wild when he has a bad game, or go like get rid of the bum the second he misplays a pass. We have to be understanding that these are humans dealing with human situations.
Yeah, and even though he is mature and plays well beyond his years, we still have to keep in mind that he is 19 and still has a ton of growing to do. And hopefully that this is not something that will stunt that growth. It can be a stepping stone. And I think all of the negatives aside, if you were to take away that penalty situation, everything leading up to that, he was a national hero. I mean, people were ready to. I think he had really throughout this tournament made it more of a name for himself than even the Sanchos. For a few seasons now, Jadon Sancho has been this amazing English talent that teams are clamoring over and wanting to spend big money on, and it was interesting to see Saka's name really grow and gain in stature as this tournament went on, because he really had the goods. I think that was what it came down to, is when he had the opportunities, he showed up more than some of the other players on this English team. And that was refreshing to see a young player really come into his own. And, even though he's not for sale right now, I think his value has grown immensely. And I hope that if you can separate those things and get back to what was really good about this tournament for him, there's a lot of positives to take away. And I think he should feel more confident than he did going into it. And hopefully that he's not coming out of it feeling less than he should. I hope that whoever is around him is able to help him separate those things in his mind.
God, see, I just had a flashback of seeing his face after he missed the penalty. Like, it was so devastating for him.
The tears. I mean, he was in tears. That was just so. I was yelling in my house. My family was wondering what the heck was going on. I'm like, no, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Worst
And I
possible
thought that, like,
scenario.
short of a devastating injury, I think that is maybe one of the worst outcomes that could happen in all of sport. I mean, to have a game hinge on your kick,
Yeah.
not even just like you missed a shot in the run of play, but it
Yeah.
came down to you making one kick. Like, there's no higher pressure situation than that. I don't think any other sport creates that sort of one-on-one um, like focus on an individual.
I think the closest is a field goal kicker in NFL
Sure. Yeah.
at the game ending of a playoff or whatever. You can kind of have that same type of pressure and that same type of villainization.
Mm-hmm.
Just I watched one of the ESPN documentaries about the Buffalo Bills and that poor kicker who missed the winning field goal.
Yeah, and that, I think the scale. I mean, NFL is huge here, but I think even the scale goes beyond that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Euros this year specifically were huge globally in ratings, and like just more eyes on this tournament than ever before. So that's great. It's great for the sport, but again, maybe one of the worst case scenarios for Saka specifically.
Right.
But I am pulling for him to just come out and have, you see these things kind of go a couple different ways, and if he can shake off the negativity that comes along with this, it can be a stepping stone to that next level, because there are people like Messi who had up until this Copa America win
Mm-hmm.
had not found success on the international stage, and that you just have to, the best people, the best players find ways to keep going and still develop and keep coming back and trying again. Like, this can be the thing that motivates him to go get better and go make sure that never happens to him again.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a fan perspective, I think that most of us aren't blaming him and aren't expecting him to, or aren't putting the blame on him for that loss. And so I think it shouldn't affect his development. I don't think we're going to be looking at him any differently, So hopefully that type of pressure comes off. But as I say, we need to remember as fans to maybe be a little bit softer, especially with him when it comes to his development.
Yeah. But he's still one of our best players. So I think the expectation is still that he's going to come in and somewhat be better than he was before, even though maybe like developmentally it was just kind of the rest of the country or the rest of the world kind of catching up to what we already knew.
Yeah.
So it's not like he just suddenly is a better player. It's just kind of everybody is acknowledging that he is a great, or has the potential to be a great player.
Well, I think one of the issues has been that Arsenal's been bad for the last couple of years, so that not as many people have been watching Arsenal games like we do day in and day out. And so they don't get to see him play a ton of matches and see his brilliance. And then when it's on the world stage, everyone's like, oh, wait, here's this guy.
And I do think like the things that he does don't necessarily, like, he's not lighting up the scoreboard at this point in his career yet. He'll put together a good run of assists and maybe an occasional goal, but the players that tend to get a lot of attention are the ones that do have a good goal scoring record or do make frequent assists. And he's just kind of rounding into that sort of form and developing still. So I think he still hasn't quite reached that level yet in his career. And that's fine. I just hope that the expectations aren't so high that he feels like he has to suddenly perform at that level. It's like, it's okay to be 19 and still growing and developing in our system. And the system is still developing around him. I mean, he's who knows what this Arsenal team will look like when it's fully clicking and they've got the right personnel in around him. But I think he still has another level to get to within the Arsenal team as well.
Yeah. And well, speaking of development, and I don't know if this is a correct transition, but
Yeah, it works for me.
yeah. What are your thoughts? We had a game today.
Oh, you jump right into the game. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I got to watch this. I kind of had spaced that there was a game today at all. It was snuck up on me, and I saw that it was on ESPN 3, so I threw it on, and it was well. Did you get to watch it at all?
I was unable to watch. Unfortunately, I actually had things to do today, so
Yeah,
I was
I
unable.
technically did too, but
You know, there's only so much soccer I can watch, and but I did read the recaps and all that jazz. But
yeah, it's like I said earlier, it was kind of like picking up where we left off in many ways. Um, it was interesting to see some players they hadn't seen for a while in the Arsenal uniform. The first half had, Cedric starting. We had Willian, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah. It was a who's who of Arsenal's second or third choices. Kolasinac was in there. I mean, it was guys you almost forgot still played for us. And so that first half was not great. I will say that. And Nketiah had one of his skill sets that I kind of forget about that I really do enjoy is that he is a great harasser of players. He will cause turnovers in dangerous areas.
mm-hmm.
But this was an example of what is missing from his game, and that's being lethal when he does do that, because he caused a turnover and was one-on-one with the keeper and puts it just wide. Yeah. I mean, it was just so frustrating to have that situation created and then have him scuff it at the end there. Reece Nelson, I want him to be better. He has moments of brilliance, but it's just not the complete package. And that you can blame most of that on him not having consistent game time. But it's this catch-22 of who wants to give the guy a consistent game time when he doesn't take advantage of the time that you give him. So I don't know what his future is. He's not a name I've really thought about in this offseason, but he needs something to happen with his career. He cannot continue to just do what he did last year and be this ghost that haunts the locker room.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people I saw online, the reaction to the lineup, and it was like a lot of or outgoing players or whatever was the.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if this is a little bit of like a last chance kind of, or not last chance, because obviously it's the start of preseason, but a little bit of Arteta taking stock of some of these players and seeing if he can't mine some gold out of these less than gilded players.
Yeah,
for some of them, I think. And then the other thing I think is, I have a sneaking suspicion that this transfer window is going to be not as exciting as we would all wish, and I think that it's going to be a little bit more quiet. And I think some of these players that we want to move on just aren't going to move on.
I think sales-wise, it is going to be difficult to offload a lot of these players. I think the reality of the transfer window is that it's really just getting started. Like, there's this little bit of a lull right at the moment because the Euros just ended. So a lot of players are talking to their agents and things are moving in the background. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll start to see things really spin up, because I know, like with a lot of the English players, most of the players that are in the Euros were kind of putting their domestic careers on hold while they focused on the tournament. So I understand that things have not been as lively as we might hope as Arsenal fans, but I don't want to say this is a bust, because we still have quite a bit of time left, and really things are just getting started. I think anybody that's made transfers thus far were people that were on free transfers, so there wasn't really anything holding them back, or they were not in the national team picture yet. So that's kind of a lot of prospects getting shuffled around.
Yeah, but it's not saying that it's just Arsenal. I think just the transfer window in general is going to be a slow one this year. And I think even with Kane, like, I was talking to those Tottenham players or the Tottenham fans that were there at the game about Kane, And they're expecting him actually to stay at this point because they do have 2 years on his contract. I didn't realize that. I thought he was on his last year, but I guess they have 2 years on his contract.
Uh-huh.
And so there's not a lot of reason for them to move. And if he doesn't move, I just don't think there's a lot of money being floating around. There has to be money coming from somewhere. And I think a lot of owners are on their knees right now. You look at what's happening at Madrid, what's happening at Barcelona. There's not
Juventus.
There's not money to be thrown around. And it's kind of, transfer markets always work in this way where like if there's not any money coming in, they kind of stagnate. Money's the oil that moves everything around. And if there isn't money being thrown in, there's just not a lot of splashy transfers to be made.
I think the things that will get things moving a little bit is the idea that Barcelona has to move players because of the Messi situation. If they want to bring him back, they have to clear the space for him to even be registered. So there's, and not just him, like all the new players that they've signed cannot be registered until they clear the space and get under the, or get their salary right size there. Juventus, I think, is in the same situation where they're just overextended, and Madrid to some extent as well. So I think, although they might not be splashing big cash, they have to move players. So I think they'll be in sales mode, which is an interesting. Well, Barcelona's already bought a bunch of players, so they're always doing things they probably shouldn't be doing. But yeah, I think, and then you've got PSG and Chelsea, and those are the sorts of teams that seem to always be spending big on players for some reason. They always seem to have money. Man City to some degree as well, but I think hard to gauge by what Pep has said. But he was like, the numbers that are being tossed around for strikers, we can't afford that. But it's kind of typical of him to just kind of throw some water on the fire a little bit, because it's like, we don't want to spend that much money, so let's talk it down like we can't afford it.
Well, he doesn't use strikers anyway, so
yeah. Why buy a striker? You can just put out a bunch of midfielders exactly. And call it good. So it will be interesting to see if the dominoes start falling, because I do think there will be a couple big moves that will cause some other ripple effects to occur. But it's a toss up this year, because it is going to require some of the teams that do have a lot of money to really go out and try to find those deals that are out there. And then everybody else, I think, is going to be, there's going to be a ton of loans with options to buy, or loans with obligations down the road, because I think everybody's trying to kick the can down to next year and beyond.
Yeah, and I think the reason I bring it up is I do feel we may have to temper. I'm personally tempering my expectation of who's going out. I don't think all the players we want to go out are gonna go out.
Yeah,
I think my nightmare scenario, which I'm preparing myself for, is that we have Willian for another year. Like I with his salary where he is and the season he just had, there's not a lot of clamoring for him. So some of those players that we saw today play, I am really, I don't know, preparing myself for the fact that they might be hanging around.
There's a lot of these guys are going to have to. I mean, Willian will probably not be in this situation, but a lot of the guys like Nketiah and Nelson. Joe Willock wasn't playing today, but he's probably in the same boat. Ainsley Maitland-Niles, maybe not him, but a lot of these guys who are kind of on the fringe right now, who maybe aren't the first choice because we don't have European soccer. There's just not minutes to go around. So they got to look long and hard about the guys that they really want to have around the first team to develop and think will really realistically get minutes. And then everybody else, they've got to get out on loans, because you can't have a Nelson situation where you have a guy just sitting around playing with the U23s and not developing. It's a waste of an asset. Yeah. So you have to find ways to get these guys playing time somewhere else. And there's going to be an appetite for that. Like I said, there's going to be a ton of teams out there looking for loans right now. And if we can just get those salaries off the books, that lets us go out and hopefully get a number 10 that we can splash big money on, or, go get a Ben White or whatever they end up doing in that situation. And even with that, they're already pretty much sent Saliba off on another loan. And so I think that's an admission that we're either happy with what we have, or they're pretty confident they're going to go out and get Ben White. And that's going to be another piece to that center back contingent. But there's the other piece to this game that I really enjoyed is, in the preseason, you do get to see some younger players that even haven't quite cracked the conversation yet. These are super young guys. There was, I think, a player that came in today. I'm trying to remember his name, but he was only 17, Jeez. And he looked like he was just swimming in his uniform. Like they gave him an extra large, and he couldn't even. It was just hanging off of him. But he was like he's like a 6-foot kid, but for some reason they gave him like the largest uniform ever. So he really looked like a 17-year-old playing among men, but he actually looked great. And like there was a couple guys that came on that looked pretty good, and I'm like, man, the future looks bright. Like the pipeline from the Hale end to the first team is still chugging along. The one maybe the one that was a little concerning was Akwanko, the goalkeeper. I think he just re-signed or signed to the to be the third goalkeeper with Arsenal, I believe. I should really double check that, but he looked all right. But again, this is a 19-year-old kid in his first professional game, and the first goal was pretty much Cedric giving him a bad back pass. So I would say this is 50 to 60% on him, but he's under pressure with a striker running at him, and Kwanko is not able to make the kick out of there, and pretty much sets it up for an open goal. And that's frustrating, but you also have to chalk it up to inexperience and nerves and all these things that come with being a first-time starter at 19, and that was unfortunate. But then that whole second half, I was really impressed with the guys that came on, both our veterans and the young people. Party came on, Lacazette came on, Pepe came on, and it definitely changed the look of the team. Pepe especially, like, I am super excited for him this season.
I was just going to say that. I'm so excited for him.
Yeah, I think if you would have talked to either one of us when we started this podcast, Pepe was definitely not a guy we were super high on. Like, I think I have definitely grown a lot in my admiration of what he can do, and I think he has definitely stepped his game up in the latter part of last year, and it seems like he has not skipped a beat. Like, he was dangerous. He was putting shots on goal. His curling left-footed shot is right there. He unfortunately he earned a penalty but missed the penalty. Call it, typical, very Arsenal-y of him.
I mean, if you want to know, I have many pet peeves, and as you've listened to these shows, you will learn all my pet peeves. One of my pet peeves is players that win the penalty taking the penalty. I think it should always be someone else, because just your adrenaline, everything running, what's going on. I understand you want to take it, but I feel like it's a good rule of thumb to have someone else take that penalty.
I agree. I think that should have been a Lacazette situation, but it is what it is, and it's a preseason, so let's call that what it is.
I'm not going to be too upset about it. So
yeah, Party had a free kick that he put so much power into, and could have just shattered the post because it hit so hard. It was like inches away from being a perfectly placed shot, but I was just like, all right, he's getting dialed in. It's pretty close. These shots from distance, maybe one of them is going to go in early in the season, and he'll get that. He'll just dial it in a little bit more. Yeah,
that's what preseason's for. It's adjusting the sights a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. The one goal that Arsenal was able to put together was a nice Bellerin cross to Emile Smith-Rowe on the back post, and Emile Smith-Rowe, man, that's another guy that just seemed to pick up where he left off. He was buzzing around the midfield and seemed to be finding good spots to pop up in the box. And I think Arteta specifically called that out and saying that that's kind of a piece of his game that he's been missing, and they've been practicing it and working on it. So hopefully he's able to kind of be the finisher and not just a setup guy. And I think that would be amazing if they can get him firing on all cylinders this year. He's another player like Saka. It's just he's got levels to his game, and it's just kind of finding that next stage in his development, not letting him get stagnant, because we've seen that too many times with some of the Arsenal youngsters who just hit a plateau and maybe stay there a bit too long, and you see their value and their confidence decline. Arteta needs to find ways to keep pushing these players to that next level and finding the system or whatever it is to get the most out of him. So I'm excited for what Emile Smith Rowe is going to do this season as well, and that's another player everybody's going to have their eyes on for sure. I think he's destined to be part of the national team conversation in his own right, and I think he's going to feel that pressure after Saka's performance.
Well, having not watched the game, and I didn't see much of him being mentioned in the write-ups, how did Aubameyang look? Did he look kind of carried on from last year? Or?
A little bit. There was a couple moments where he looked dangerous, and the thing I think is still missing from this team is getting the right balls to the players. You know, like Lacazette is a very different player to Aubameyang, to Saka, to, you know, whoever is finishing needs to have a certain setup, right? Like Aubameyang's great with balls over the top and taking guys on, but if you can't get him on the run and into open space, he just has too much work to do. So there were moments where they were trying to get it to him and he was offside or whatever it is, but I just feel like they need to work a little bit more to kind of meet Aubameyang in the middle a little bit. He can only do so much on his own. Mm-hmm. He needs the right service. He needs the right space to make it work. So like I said, the players that were around him were second tier, third tier players. So I wasn't chalking it up to him, but there was a lot of the same stuff we saw from last season where it was like, he's just not quite firing. But I do think if you go out and get a number 10, or, you know, you get the right players around him, he still has it and will potentially be a good player again. I just think he's got to get into a rhythm, and he's got to be able to expect the ball. Like I think that is an aspect that Arsenal needs to work on, and I think Arteta has talked about this in the past as well, that players need to make runs knowing that they're going to get the ball when they do it, you know, and players need to make runs consistently so that the people providing know that they can just kind of kick the ball into space and there will be somebody there to get it. So I think there is kind of that chemistry piece that is still lacking. And that's, you know, it is that creative spark that it's kind of still been missing. And so it to me, it is about finding chemistry with the players we do have, but also maybe finding a player or two that can bring a little bit more creativity to the game. So I'm still hoping that there's a number 10 out there for us somewhere that will unlock the best in Aubameyang or whoever's playing up top.
I have faith too. Me too.
I don't know who it is, but somebody's got to be out there. But I think that, you know, this game, there were probably more people that were upset about it than should have been. Just getting the buzz off the internet, it just felt like, man, why people were just like Arteta out already. Like, and it's a preseason game, and honestly, the first goal is a fluke, and the second goal was clearly offside. And like it being preseason, they're not going to VAR anything. Yeah. So it was clearly offside. Arteta called that out. I watched it again. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy was way offside. So it just what it is. You cannot put too much stock into this. It is a bunch of guys running around trying to get fit. That's all it is.
It's training. And I think the people have to realize that it is a training match. The important part, the number one goal, Arteta said it's fitness was the first and foremost goal of that, just getting game sharpness into the legs. and then just kind of working out some things. It wasn't. I almost think they shouldn't keep score on these things, or like it shouldn't televise them. Like
Yeah.
it's you need to be watching these types of games with a very different lens than a game that actually matters. You're looking for, how are the players performing? How do they look? Where's their fitness at? What type of passes are they making? That sort of thing, as opposed to, did we win the game?
I was just happy to see my old friends again, it's like,
Exactly.
It's like just getting back together with the guys. Yeah, it's one game of many in the preseason, and I expect they will get better and better, and we will see probably a couple new players before the preseason is done. I don't know how Arsenal will do their business, if things are gonna start rolling here, or if it's gonna be an off season where they leave all their business to the last minute, and we see guys kind of trickling in as the season starts. But it's okay. I'm not super worried yet. We'll panic later in a month when when we're starting to run out of time, or when we haven't heard a lot of rumors about outgoing players or incoming players. That then we can panic. But it's early days, and I think we're gonna have to just cool our jets a little bit until we get a little bit further along here.
Yeah, we will get through this, I promise.
Yes, no need to panic. So now the question is, do we talk about our one last thing, or do we take a little break?
I think we should just roll on.
Yeah, there's no reason to take a break. Okay, Arsenal made one signing, so we've got a guy.
Woo!
We did it. Nuno Tavares has come over from Portugal, from Benfica. He's fairly young. I think he's another 19-year-old.
21.
21, okay.
And 168 days.
He's a backup option to Tierney, and it was an area of need, so I'm glad Arsenal has checked one of those things off the list. We can put that behind us and move on to the next thing. He's a Portuguese player, and it's my impression from what I've heard about him is he has a ton of potential, but he's definitely an unpolished gem. Like he could be really good if he gets the right, if he gets the playing time, and if he gets put in the right system. And I think it was, I think he had bounced between Sporting and Benfica, and so he'd pretty much done all he could do at the top levels of Portugal. So it was time for him to move on he was only playing as a backup, I believe, in the Benfica setup. So he, making that leap to the Premier League is probably a good thing for his career, and we'll see if he gets a lot of playing time. Tierney has definitely shown he can be injured for periods of time. He has been, I wouldn't say frequently, but enough since he came over from Celtic.
Well, I mean, I think it's good, because I think poor Tierney has just had the weight of the world put on him. He's had so much pressure without any good backup that I think I bet you normally when players when a club signs a player in your position, you probably get a little anxious, like, oh God, this is the end of my career. But I think Tierney probably breathed a sigh of relief and was like, finally someone to actually competently back me up, so I don't have to play through injury. I don't have to rush back. I can, be a normal player,
Yeah. It's not clear yet. We'll have to kind of see how this goes in the preseason, if he gets some playing time. But I'm curious to see. It sounds like the style of play that he brings is similar to what Tierney does, and that he's able to really get forward and put in some decent crosses. And I think that's what you want from a backup, is somebody who's not bringing you something entirely different. You want to kind of be able to put your backup in and continue this style of play that you're used to. So that has potential to be a good thing. But I am curious to see if there's a distinct drop off in the quality from Tierney to Tavares here, and if it's going to be something where like, oh man, now we've got to play our backup, we're screwed. I don't want that to be the situation. But I think he's got potential to develop into a good player, and with a player like Tierney in front of you that he has the potential to really learn from, that's a positive thing, and something Arsenal hopefully will continue to do across the board. I think with the Conga learning from Party, if and when that deal goes through, I think that's another one where you can look and say, okay, this is a great like apprenticeship setup that we have going on.
Definitely.
So we'll see how this all plays out. I'm excited that we have one player at least, and that, like I said, that checks the box, and we can move on to the next thing.
No, and it does feel like having the official signing does feel like the ball's rolling. At least that we have one signing down, and hopefully more to follow. So
yeah. So I mean, in terms of areas of need, it looks like, to me at least, striker is very low on our areas of people we're going to sign. The Conga clearly will be brought in to help bolster the midfield, but I don't see him like being the Xhaka replacement. Assuming Xhaka goes, that's to be seen. But if you're looking to upgrade on or improve on Xhaka, I don't think it's Lokonga at all. And you got your number 10, whoever that may be. You need to go get that, and this center back situation that never seems to be solved.
Yeah, and I wouldn't count on the Kong until it happens. he definitely has that feeling of a signing that everyone's expecting to happen, and I hear the rumors. I know that there was a rumor that like personal terms have been agreed and all that, but again, I wouldn't put all my chickens into that basket. Is that eggs in the basket, not chickens?
You can have chickens in a basket. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I think it'll get done, but again, there's no pen to paper yet, so we'll see. I don't know who would be next in the pipeline as far as signings go, except it sounds like this the deal that has the most smoke still is the Ben White deal, and that sounds like all parties involved are open to it. It's just a matter of getting the numbers right. So we'll see if that comes together in the next couple weeks. Beyond that, though, it's a lot of rumors, but nothing that's really stuck out yet. So we'll see if things start picking up in the next week as players start settling in after their domestic tournaments, and we'll hopefully have more to talk about next week on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I think teams are getting really into the swing of the preseason now. I know Bundesliga has already played their first German Cup game this week, so there are things livening up, and that should hopefully mean that some sort of movement happens in the transfer window, because it has been a quiet window so far. So
it would not shock me if one or more than one of these positions gets filled by a loan deal. I think if you're spending 50 million or so on Ben White, I have a hard time. I still don't believe that they're going to spend another 50 to 60, plus on a number 10. So I don't know. Some of these, I forgot to mention goalkeeper is another position they need to at least sign a backup with the potential of somebody who could take over for Leno if he decides he doesn't want to stay as an Arsenal player in the next year or two. So there's a lot of things that I'm sure they're keeping their ears open for the right deal. But it's going to be an interesting window to see what Adu and Arteta come up with, and to try to slot solutions that make sense financially, but also work towards getting Arteta what he needs to get the system that he wants. Because I still don't know if they're really gearing towards a 4-3-3, but there's definitely seems to be an emphasis in ball control and technical ability, and I'm curious to see if they can offload some players, and also if they can really change what this team is. I think that was one of the interesting aspects to today's preseason game. Is like, well, this just feels like more of the same. So these players clearly are not the solution necessarily. Not that was our best lineup by any means, but like there definitely is room for improvement in several areas. So I don't throw Arteta under the bus for today's loss. I mean, it wasn't really that big of a deal, but I mean, it's like he has what he has to work with, and it's early, so I don't know that we're going to see too big of a change. But I also think he needs some different tools in his toolbox to really get where he needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest disappointment would not be that we didn't get these signings or whatever, but if we came out with basically the same, I don't know, way of playing, and it just looked like last year. If it's a repeat of last year, that's going to be a disaster in my mind. Not necessarily like stats where we end up in the season, but just how we played. I want to see a movement in how we play, what we do with the ball, how the team is set up. That's the most important thing to me.
I do think if we could start the season like we finished the season, then that over a whole year would be an improvement. I think you would see hopefully us get beyond 8th. But again, it may not. You couldn't just throw out this lineup and call it good.
Yeah,
like everybody else is going to improve in some way or another. I don't even if it is a down year. I feel like there's a lot of teams around us that are going to find ways to make those little 1 or 2% improvements that pushes them a little bit further. And if Arsenal just throw the same stuff at the wall and hope that it sticks, it's not. You're not going to get to that next level. You're not going to get out of that mid-table grouping because there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've talked it out enough for this week.
No break.
That was a marathon.
How's your voice? Is your voice okay?
My voice is all right. I might have to drink some more beer though to really calm my throat down.
Exactly.
We didn't say so, but thank you, Tim Whittom, for sending a question in about today's game, because we were going to talk about it anyway, but I want to acknowledge you for sending in something to us.
Yeah, appreciate it. He's a good friend of the pod, Tim.
Exactly. To the rest of you who have tuned in this week, we appreciate you. I know there's not a ton going on with Arsenal, so if you're still listening to us, I love you for that. We're still trying to make it all happen, even though there's not a ton of excitement. But we're hoping every week that there's still stuff to talk about, and somehow we find ways to make an episode. If you like what you're hearing, review. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so wherever you pick up your podcast. If you have a desire to see our faces while we talk, if you like what you see there, you can go and subscribe on YouTube. That's West of North London. Just search us there and you can find our podcast on YouTube as well. So like and subscribe there. Review and subscribe if you're just a podcast listener. And if you want to see me tweet a lot of things during a game, at W of N London is the way you can do that, and you can also send in your questions that way. If you're more of an email person, we do accept those as well. westofnorthlondon@gmail.com is the way to do that. And if you really want to get into the episode, if you want to be a part of the episode in a more advanced way, anchor.fm/westofnorthlondon/message is the place to go where you can send in your voice to be a part of this podcast. So you can send in questions, comments that way as well, if voicemail is more your flavor. The theme song is by Bobcat. They are a band that you can find at bobc.at. That's Bobcat spelled out. If you are confused, that is a website. .at is the way to get there. No Course to Follow is their latest album, and there's probably news just around the corner about shows and much more, so go check that out there. I believe that is it for us this week. So as always,
see you at the next gun show.